Fit and Healthy Athlete Podcast. Debbie Potts is here to help you burn fat, optimize health, and enhance your performance in life as you age. We'll explore metabolic health, holistic health, and actionable insights with guest experts and deep dives into health topics. Whether you're an athlete or just looking to thrive, let's discover how to become your best self. Let's get started.
Hey, welcome to the Coach Debbie Potts Show. This is a show for you if you are a driven, ambitious, high performer who feels that they are doing all the right things but still feeling stuck. I'm your host, Debbie Potts. I'm a former top endurance athlete turned functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, also known as FDN practitioner, and I'm also a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, as well as a long-time personal trainer and endurance sport coach for cycling, running, triathlons, and I'm also the creator of the Holistic Method coaching program. About 10 years ago, I was pushing my body to the limit, running a fitness studio all by myself. I hit a wall. I had unexplained weight gain, extreme fatigue, disrupted sleep, memory issues, brain fog, all while eating clean and training hard. I suddenly realized it's not just about what you eat or how you train. It's about what is happening under the hood. Now, it is my mission to help people as you, a high performer, to stop spinning your wheels and finally uncover the hidden stressors, metabolic dysfunction, and hormone imbalances that are holding you back from being your best self and living your best life in the second half of your life. So on my podcast and the YouTube channel, I will be sharing real conversations, expert interviews, and data-driven strategies to help you rebuild your metabolism, balance your hormones, restore your energy, and create your strongest, most vibrant future self. So if you are ready to stop guessing and start investigating and wanting to thrive from the inside out, you are in the right place. So let's get started on your journey to becoming your metabolically fit, more resilient, and unstoppable self at any age. So head to debbiepotts.net and schedule a call with me to discover more of my 3 coaching packages. And we can get you started on being your best self in the future. All right, let's get to the show today. Enjoy and let me know your questions, comments, and suggestions. Hit subscribe and share this to other high performers who are struggling to get results when they think they're doing all the right things. But sometimes we just need to investigate what is actually going on and put the missing pieces of their health puzzle together again. All right, talk soon. Enjoy the show. Hey guys, it's Debbie, and I am back with a new episode, a rabbit hole deep dive, a little different and honestly a little vulnerable for me, because instead of doing a deep diving into labs, research, case studies, I'm turning the spotlight onto myself to use me as an example. So today I am walking you through my own full root cause investigation, the exact process I take my own clients through using my labs, my genetics, my symptoms, and history, especially since I had my change of life. Adrenal exhaustion, metabolic chaos started in 2013, which led me down this path to be the practitioner I wanted to find. And I wanted to, over years, become that person that I needed when I was struggling, trying to understand what the heck is wrong with me. Why am I so tired? Why did I go from peak in my athletic career to feeling the worst ever of my life? And how do I get out of this and get back to doing what I love to do and to thrive every day and regain that vitality. Now, 10, 12 years, 13 years later, I feel great, but I know it could be better. So I decided to do a GI-MAP test, which is a beautiful sample of your stool, your poop. And I did that for my birthday, which was on a full moon. So you can learn more about why to do testing on a full moon for looking at parasites and getting more activity in your body. It happens around the full moon. And looking at my different symptoms over the last few years, why am I more vulnerable to stress, to inflammation, to have more of a struggle to lose weight? So I went back and looked at all my tests I've done the last few years. I have not done a stool test for a couple years, and I've been doing blood work last couple years, about 3 times a year with Wild Health Precision Medicine, getting their clarity report. And I shared that in a previous episode with the doctor I use at Wild Health. Dr. Megan Jones is amazing. And now I'm just putting this together with my own investigation. And I just wanted to share with you. So this is a really long 4-part podcast that I'll put into one. You can listen to it just to see if you understand how we need to look at the body as a whole, how we need to zoom out before we zoom in and really look at patterns, especially for me over the years since I went from being top of my athletic career to the lowest point of my fitness health in 2013 in just 6 months, and understanding what happened way back when. And then since then, I've had definite improvements, but I realize there's something still missing. And I as I look at my mitochondria test I did with Mescreen earlier this year, look at my genetics, look at this newest lab work, and find myself being curious, did I not ever strengthen that vagus nerve as much as I thought I was? And did I really damage my mitochondria so much from my previous life, from being busy all the time, chronic stress? And I shared my history in my book called Life is Not a Race, It is a Journey. And becoming the practitioner I always wanted to help me is what I'm focusing on today, and really sharing with you myself as a great example of case study, because I have a full acceptance to, or approval to, share my own data with you. So we're looking at the real behind the scenes of how I build what I'm calling now, really looking at what we should be doing middle age to be our best self in the future. So it's called the FutureYou Blueprint. And this is what I'm putting all these clues together to create a personalized program for you, but for me right now. So I took functional lab testing, my recent GI-MAP, just November 2025. I've done multiple advanced blood chemistry assessments on my own self. And remember, even functional medicine people don't always do the assessment we do as FDN practitioners to really look at your lab results from your blood chemistry test in optimal ranges. But then take it one step further, the information we get from the blood chemistry panel when it's higher or lower than that optimal range gives us clues. And then we start to look for patterns. And I find even people that I've worked with in functional medicine, naturopaths, might not have this training. So understanding how we can see patterns through all this information I'm getting all together. And then I tied in my genetics. I've done Wild Health last couple years, their clarity report. Previously, I did the DNA company genetic testing. Back in the day, of course, I did 23andMe, and then I've done DNA Fit and Arivel. I've done a bunch of different labs or genetic testing. So I put them all into one spreadsheet to see similarities, make sure they're all the same and what that means, and then put that against my lab tests that I just did. So looking at how we can feel our best self as we age and not accept these struggles as our new normal, and understand that this is something we can do once we figure out the root causes. It's not just one thing. And it was a shocker for me to figure out what was my root cause. And then we always work backwards and understand, why is that happening? Work backwards again. Why is that happening? And then see the different clues and correlations all together. It's super fascinating. So you might enjoy this or not, but I needed to actually do this for myself. So selfish reasons, I'm sharing my own story because this is how I learn and process, is talking about it. So I am going to do my assessment because you hear me say all the time, test and not guess. You don't know what you don't know, and we need to look under the hood to figure out what is going on. And we call it hidden sources of chronic stress. And as FDN practitioners, hidden stands for hormones. So hormone imbalances, immune dysfunction, digestion issues, detoxification issues, energy systems, and N for nervous system, neurotransmitters, and really looking at all this together to help us improve how we age. It is a choice how you want to age, I believe, as I watch my mother age and her friends age, and how the choices that we make, even starting in our 40s and 50s, is so essential to how we're going to be showing up to life every day as our future self. So I would love for you to visualize and even write out, how do you see yourself living in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? So start visualizing. And that's how I got started looking at the FutureYou Blueprint, is looking at the visualization, creating your vision board, and, looking at the year ahead. What do you want to do for you? How do you define success? What does success look like in this next year? And then what does that look like as your future self when you're 70, when you're 80, when you're 90, and start planning that out. And that's how I got down into this new mental state almost of how I'm showing up to life every day. It's like, what am I doing today that's going to make me better tomorrow and in my future self? So don't wait until you are struggling to start investigating, because I feel even myself, I didn't save money to do all these tests, which I just did GI map, which costs $380. So it's well worth it. And doing a blood test, you can get for a couple $100 on Rupa Health or Alta Labs, and then get what you can from your doctor under insurance, or else they charge you way too much money. And I wanted to find out what am I missing? What's going on? And so this year I focused on, for my birthday, to become the client. And even as a lifelong active athlete, fit and healthy on the outside, maybe I could be better on the inside. And working as a FDN practitioner and a nutritional therapy practitioner, I feel it's important to practice what we preach. And I'm doing all the lifestyle work. I just watched the sunrise this morning with my coffee and did some breath work and enjoyed time in nature and walk in my bare feet when I can and do all the stuff. But that's just not enough. So even with decades of working in fitness and metabolism, nutrition, and lab testing, I needed to look at what's going on under the hood, because I know I could do better. Why am I struggling losing weight? Why am I having difficulty ever since my adrenal exhaustion in 2013, getting my running back? And it had nothing really to do with my zone 2 training and keeping my heart rate in the max aerobic function heart rate and all that stuff, and doing speed work. I was doing all that and I still didn't make a shift. So I knew something at a cellular level was off, and fatigue that didn't make sense all the time. And my skin has been dry and behind my ear, and I just have a struggle to gain as much muscle for how much work I do. And my recovery is a little bit longer, and my glucose can change. And just so all these things that you feel that, hey, I'm doing all the right things, but something just isn't right. You know the feeling? And I really believe, instead of ignoring it, instead of trying to push harder, and instead of adjusting your macros and your supplements, I feel that we need to get out of the cycle of trial and error and work with a practitioner that can figure this out, because we're trained to look at all of it and be curious and investigate. And as I'm working on my own self as a case study, I'm spending hours looking at all the data and pulling it all together. And I don't feel that most people do that. I know other people I've talked to, they spend 15 minutes before your appointment and 15 minutes afterwards and just kind of put it together. I like to go deep and maybe spend too much time because there's so much to look at, but then we start to see patterns. So I think we need to take care of our whole self from the inside out. I love to apply the holistic method, my 8 elements, plus a 4-phase protocol to repair and rebuild and start at the foundational level and really get a deep understanding of functional pattern mapping, we can call it. And so with me, what I found was pretty shocking, but beautifully interconnected. It was so fascinating why I wanted to do a podcast on it. It's not just one issue. It wasn't about aging. It's not about my age and going through perimenopause, blaming my hormones, because I think a lot of people, my age females, are blaming everything on menopause. It's not willpower. It's not discipline. It's a network. It's a pattern and a set of root causes hiding under the surface. And only my symptoms were just messages. This is what I'm talking about in part 1. How I uncovered the hidden clues in my gut, my mitochondria, blood chemistry, and genetics that finally explained exactly what has been going on in my body that I have not been testing the last few years, because I felt I was doing so much better, but I still was like, there's some things why am I not getting better at this? And I'm doing all the other stuff. So this episode is to use myself as an example to help give you the roadmap of what I'm doing for myself to be the detective, not be stuck in cycle trial and error, trying to diet more, change your exercise. It's more than that, because I'm a great example. I am doing all the right things about the protein and the lifestyle habits and all that. So let's dive into the first clue that I have with my GI map. So here's what I found out. This might not all make sense for you, but I'll try to break down what these markers mean and how they're clues to help put the missing pieces of my puzzle to be my best self in the future all together. The first clue in the GI map is measuring what's going on in the gut. The gut is where I like to start, not because it's trendy, but because your gut drives hormones, metabolism, brain, immune system, detox pathways, and mitochondria energy. So when our gut gets disrupted, the entire system compensates. So my GI map revealed a fascinating, to me, 5 major clues. Butyrate. We've talked about butyrate. I'll do a whole episode if you want on short chain fatty acids, low butyrate producers, and how they're related to ATP. Remember, ATP is energy currency that who makes? The mitochondria. So we need to think how this all connects. We'll tie it up together in the 4th section here. So my butyrate producing bacteria, Akkermansia, almost 0, which some reason most GI maps, Akkermansia is low in everybody, if that's true. Faciobacterium was very low, and my Firmicutes was suppressed. Butyrate is not just a gut fuel, and just defining things as we go here. Butyrate is a primary mitochondria fuel source for the colon cells and a global metabolic signal. I didn't really realize how important these butyrate are until I dove in a little deeper. Butyrate controls ATP production. ATP, remember, is energy, fat burning, gut barrier strength, which I knew of, but it does more. Inflammation, cortisol signaling, thyroid hormone activation, insulin sensitivity. So when butyrate is low, ATP drops, Oxidative stress rises, lipopolysaccharides, LPS, they leak, inflammation increases, and our friend the vagus nerve, the signaling weakens. And I couldn't understand, why do I seem to have low vagal nerve? We'll tie up in the finish because I'm doing all the vagus nerve activity to strengthen my vagus nerve, but there's certain things that can weaken that signal. So these symptoms of low butyrate matched so many of my symptoms I was experiencing. Lower power, earlier fatigue, drier skin, slow recovery, glucose swings, poor fat oxidation. This is what I want you to understand. Most people would say all those symptoms are related to aging. This is related to menopause. This is related to how life happens as we get older. Not true. This is the number one clue that my mitochondria are not getting the fuel that they needed. But let's go on. Another marker that was high steatocrit. This is a fat malabsorption issue. When I did the test, it was after actually going to the dentist for a 3-hour appointment, but I wondered if this was altered. But steatocrit was 33% on me, and optimal is under 15%. If this is real, my normal, this shares that I'm not digesting fat. I was literally fat's literally showing up in my stool that they measured on that day. So steatocrit measures unabsorbed fat. When steatocrit is high on your stool test, GI map that I use, there's different options, that can lead to clues connecting bile issues, pancreatic enzymes, or gut lining dysfunction. And so when we're not breaking down, absorbing our fat, think about what the fat-soluble vitamins are. Think about essential fatty acids. Think about all the roles that fat has in our body. Vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, so K2. What about your omega fatty acids? Low omega-3, DHA. Poor hormone production. As we've spoken about in different episodes, hormones are made from cholesterol. Cholesterol is coming from fat. Poor mitochondrial membrane integrity. Remember, our cell membranes are made with fat. Poor skin hydration. We need fat. So one marker alone, we don't treat lab results, we look at the whole picture. So anyone that's just treating this and treating that and not looking at the whole picture, they're not doing your assessment correctly. Just to give clues from just this connects with so many of my symptoms. Dry skin, more wrinkles on my face that come and go. I don't believe they're not fixable. I can repair that because I know I'm not absorbing fat, and that helps with skin health. Stagnant bile, lower sex hormone bioavailability, lower energy, T3 resistance, even though I've been taking T3 thyroid supplement for a year to 2 years, cortisol dysregulation, and here's the kicker. Fat malabsorption leads to poor bile, leads to poor detoxification. And if you look at blood chemistry markers, correlate that with your blood chemistry marker, bilirubin. And my labs confirmed that. So we want to look at patterns. Okay, so I'm not absorbing fat. And this is key for people that are struggling doing a low carb, ketogenic, keto carnivore type of food plan. I don't like to use the word diet, but food plan. If you're eating those good foods, protein and fats, but you're not digesting them properly and breaking them down, we're going to have problems downstream. So it's not that the diet's not working, your digestion is not working. Because if we go into number 3 on my list, this one's huge. H. pylori was shown on my test. Now, I was low level, but I just finished 8 weeks of doing a pylori X supplement with a binder and working on kind of preparing to do this test. So I'm sure it was higher. And when we have H. pylori, that's another reason that stomach acid is suppressed. And if you've been following the root cause deep dive rabbit hole podcast I've been doing to share, are you fit and healthy on the inside out? Even mild H. pylori matters because it suppresses stomach acid. And when we suppress stomach acid, we have reduction in B12, zinc, iron. You're not able to break down your protein into amino acids. And if we don't have that signal to release stomach acid to break our food down and move to the next order of operations, this is not signaling the bile to be released. So we have a weaker bile release signal. So our digestion is slower, we have more fatigue, and this impacts muscle repair. So this fits with my own personal patterns of harder time building muscle, even though I'm lifting heavy weights around 4 days a week, sometimes 5, working on the 3 to 5 reps, 3 to 5 sets per muscle group, and I'm doing my protein, but I'm just not doing enough to build muscle as much as I wish would happen, even though I've been being consistent. So something else was missing, a missing ingredient. And this also connects to more soreness, slower recovery, lower power output. So this, again, a perfect puzzle piece. Remember, we're putting the missing pieces of my health puzzle together. Now, another major clue, big one, on my GI map, I've done episodes on lipopolysaccharides, endotoxicity. One of the bacteria that produce lipopolysaccharides, or we call endotoxicity when it leaks out, Enterobacter was elevated on my test. That is a bacteria that produces lipopolysaccharides. Lipopolysaccharides are toxins from gram-negative bacteria. So my elevated Enterobacter is a gram-negative bacteria that seeps into the bloodstream when the gut lining is compromised. So when you have leaky gut, I did a whole episode on LPS. If you have leaky gut, those toxins leak out of your gut and go out to the rest of your body, into the bloodstream. And then we have problems all over. It can relate to having high endotoxicity of inflammation, cortisol spikes, blood sugar spikes, vagus nerve suppression again, mitochondria damage we're talking about again, insulin resistance, thyroid slowing, skin flare-up, low butyrate. Remember, we already saw low butyrate. And mood changes. This matches everything. So I think this is fascinating how we can really figure out a personalized approach for this client, Debbie Potts. My LPS load explained on my blood chemistry panel, why do I keep seeing elevated eosinophils? The doctor didn't say these are a red flag. They don't know what to do with it. They're not trained that way. They're not trained as a health investigator as we are as FDN practitioners. And as nutritional therapy practitioner, we're looking at the foundations and putting this all together. Why do I have slow fat burning when I'm running? Why is running a challenge? Biking is not. And so we'll talk about that later. Why maybe I need more carbohydrates than I used to. Cortisol pattern with glucose. What if you have skin issues, as psoriasis or eczema? What if the mitochondria test, as I did Mescreen, and looking at labs, show reactive oxygen species, more oxidative stress? And LPS is connected to that. And then when I look back at my Mescreen mitochondria test I did earlier this year, it showed I need higher support of lipid support, reactive oxygen species. So we need to, again, put the missing pieces of the puzzle together, and LPS is a major root cause in my case. With my elevation in eosinophils, my blood chemistry panel, when eosinophils go up, it's related to more immune activation. And so this can connect with eosinophils go up when you have high lipopolysaccharides. It can go up when you have mucosal immunity issues. So immune system is in the gut, 80% around there. And if we have triggered set the alarm for the immune system is activated, that fire alarm, that's an issue. the eosinophils will go up. If anyone's bile is sluggish, you can see higher eosinophils. Dysbiosis, where the bad guys outnumber the good guys. If your histamine is elevated. So for me, for my health investigation, this is all tied together in the gut and the blood is looking at the pattern. Low butyrate, LPS is high, gut barrier is weakened, immune activation, and eosinophils are high. This is my pattern. So when we look at the blood chemistry panel, layer that in on top of my GI map, everything starts to get a little clearer. We're looking for patterns. Now, when I did my last blood work, I did do it the day before my cycle started. So, end of my cycle, before day 1 of my cycle started. So, if you know what happens luteal phase for us females, and looking at my genetics, higher cortisol is something that's going to happen late luteal phase. So this wasn't my normal cortisol for morning cortisol. Remember, blood work, cortisol is that in hormones, it's time of the day when you take that. I'd rather you do a Dutch test, that's a metabolites, a urine test, over 5 times during a 24-hour period. So you get an idea of what's your rhythm throughout the day. So I'm not a big fan of just blood work cortisol. But for me, this was a clue towards my genetics, and my fat burning turned off and my fat storage turned on. Glucose being a little bit higher and my gut barrier being a little bit more thin than it should be, slower recovery. It can mean sleep disruption, thyroid conversion reduced. So for me, as I've been trying to build up running for years, I've never been the same on long runs. So I'm using that as my example of how I struggle and feel better if I get the foundations changed based on this investigation. Because since I've been struggling, when I first struggled, I've never been as bad as that was 2013, 2015. For 2 years, I was really struggling with health issues, just not feeling myself, but my running has never come back. Everything else pretty much has. But so I'm using my longer runs, which are only, say, 10-mile runs, which is short for someone that's done marathons for years, and understanding why that is an issue and not bike riding a 5-hour ride. It's fine. Now, blood work, I'm also looking at bilirubin, and this was elevated a little bit, and that's connected to bile flow being sluggish and phase 2 liver detoxification being strained. So this, then we match to my GI map and my genetics. So then I say, okay, this correlates with high steatocrit on my GI map, Enterobacter bacteria being high, a low butyrate, and then I see patterns of my genetic SNPs I can go into, but PEMT, MTHFR, and MTRR genetics, it connects here. And then my Mescreen mitochondria test that I had more reactive oxygen species, the lipids, and the cell membrane of my mitochondria. So another puzzle piece clicking in. So this is why it's kind of fun when I work on clients' investigation going, oh my gosh, this person's been struggling for years because no one was able to dive deep and put all this together. So we have to be that detective. Fasting glucose levels change for me, so I'm not really looking at that, but just you want to look at patterns and then look at your A1C and then insulin. So when you have glucose spikes, it can be related to cortisol, lipopolysaccharides, genetics, as I have all the obesity genetics, PPARG and TCF7L2 genetic. And when you're starting your cycle, your glucose will be higher with that hormone shift to luteal to starting follicular phase. So these are predictable metabolic patterns when you look at your genes and your gut health. Now, another clue is looking at genetics, as I said, looking at your labs and how things are different. My stress sensitivity genes, as I always was curious when I got adrenal exhaustion in 2013, I started to look more in genetic perspective. Like, why do people I know on my triathlon team can race Ironmans every year and not have this breakdown and burnout in body systems? And I did. There's stress sensitivity genes, COMT, MAO, this 5-HTTLPR and ADR. RA. So there's different genetic SNPs to look at if you do DNA company, and that you might feel stress more intensely I hold adrenaline longer, I clear catecholamines slower, and my vagus nerve is more sensitive, and cortisol rises easier. So that was something new, as I can put genetics into AI and put them all together and get a little bit deeper correlations together now these days. And then combine that with my LPS and low butyrate from the GI map. This gives me major clues that I have more inflammation than other people. I have more glucose swings, more chance to have more fatigue and slower recovery from workouts. Then we can look at your genetics for metabolic flexibility. So the ability to burn fat, and then we can connect that with Pinoy metabolism testing. I have, as I said, the major fat genes. So I should be, if I didn't do what I do, I'd probably be very overweight because I have the PPARG, I have FTO, and these 3 other markers. So these metabolic flexibility genes predict poor fat tolerance under stress, insulin resistance tendencies, difficulty with high fat diets, and dependence on bile for success. So for me, this is very validated with this investigation because, yes, my bile, we discovered, is sluggish. My steatocrit is high, and my cortisol was a little higher because of my cycle. And so looking at genetics is telling me exactly what my gut and my blood chemistry are showing. And then we can look at your methylation and detoxification genes, MTHFR, MTRR, PEMP, GST, and SOD. These are good methylation and detoxification genes that can predict, do you have more chance to have sluggish bile flow? Are you struggling with antioxidant recycling? Increase in oxidative stress, more mitochondria vulnerability. And so for me, this matched what my mitochondria Mescreen test results showed. My blood chemistry panel having elevated bilirubin, skin dryness, more fatigue occasionally, and hormone sluggishness. Not just because I'm 54 years old and perimenopause, but with genetics and lifestyle and putting it all together, it's all combined. And then what's interesting, another genetic marker to look at is your omega-3 conversion, FADS1 and FADS2 I have. So I need more DHA and EPA than most people. If you know the benefits of omega-3s, I use Keon omega-3s, I get monthly, but I need to take them every day. It's one thing buying stuff, but then it's figure out when to take it. And I understand omega-3s, if you eat a smashed fish food plan every day, it was great. And I do not. I'll maybe have salmon maybe once a week. But then you have to make sure you can digest and get the fats from that fish. So 2 things, right? It's what we eat, but what we're able to digest and break down and use. So I, with my genetics and with my digestive issues, low omega-3s leads to more inflammation. Cell membranes are going to be less resilient, and mitochondria are not going to be as efficient because they're not getting the fat. And this aligns with my Mescreen lipid reactive oxygen species findings. Now, going more into this mitochondria, what I find super fascinating is what I need to talk to the Mescreen founders, share with them my analysis here. When I go back to that Mescreen mitochondria test earlier this year, it showed, again, I had lipid support category, a reactive oxygen species. So it meant I have early lipid stress, membrane instability, and oxidative load was up. This shows elevated reactive oxygen species means oxidative stress. Cell membrane stress shows network fragmentation of your mitochondria, which leads to lower energy, more damage to your mitochondria. You have less energy, ATP created. And so that means decrease in my metabolic flexibility. So crazy when you think you're doing all the right things, but if you're broken at some order of operations, you're going to have domino effect internally. So this is matching my low butyrate, my lipopolysaccharides, my stagnant bile, my genetics, my running fatigue, difficulty building muscle, and dry skin. This is all connected with the Mescreen, with that GI map and my blood test, and then my symptoms. So after pulling all this together, I discovered I wasn't aging. It's not about my hormones. It's not about my training program. It's not about willpower. It's a network dysfunction. Again, driven by my low butyrate, fat malabsorption, sluggish bile, elevated LPS, oxidative membrane stress, cortisol genetics, metabolic genetics, mitochondria being fragile, hormone binding patterns, vagus nerve suppression. But here's why I want you to hear all this. This is all reversible. And this is what I'll walk you through in part 2, looking at the root cause story and how all these clues form one powerful map of my personal physiology. And then part 3 will go into the FutureYou Blueprint, my phase plan I'm using for my recovery, and then looking at how we put this all together. So thanks for listening. Let's get up and move and stretch, and we'll talk to you next time. All right, guys, let's continue. I am going to go a little bit deeper back into my investigation. And now we're going to part 2, the clues, and what my labs revealed, a little bit deeper dive. As in part 1, I walked you through the mindset shift. Your symptoms are not random, they are messages. And how functional lab testing is how we decode those messages. Now, as we continue, part 2, we're stepping into the role of a investigator. That's kind of what we are as FDN practitioners. And I combine my trainings over the years into kind of a holistic health practitioner, looking at nutritional therapy, what I learned, and my trainings with Ben Greenfield. I did his superhuman coach program way back when, and then it became the KION program, and Paul Chek's holistic health practitioner program. And so over the past 20 years, kind of mushing this all together, creating this unique approach, looking through a lens of an investigator, a detective, a health detective. And I'm going to walk you through the exact patterns on my own labs, what they revealed, and define the science behind them. And then show you how they all connect to my symptoms. I'm just being vulnerable, being authentic, just showing everything that I am, or sharing, not showing, but sharing everything I have found out about myself over the years, and using this as an example for you to understand not to blame aging process, not to blame hormones, menopause for us females. It's part of it, but it's not just, hey, everything's happening because I'm going through this midlife crisis. For me, declining run performance, which is since I had my adrenal exhaustion in 2013. I've never been able to have the same power, and I do not believe it was related to age, because it happened when I was 42 years old and I trained and I've been trying all the different things. Now, metabolic inflexibility, stubborn fat loss, dry skin, cortisol fluctuations, harder recovery, fatigue, pockets perhaps sometimes, and accelerated signs of aging, more on my skin. And not to blame totally everything on the aging process, even there. Now, my hope is that you are hearing my story, that you start to recognize patterns in your own story, and that you cannot fix what you cannot see, and we do not know what we don't know until we test. So let's begin my evidence review. So we kind of went over this in part 1, but a little bit deeper dive in part 2, low butyrate producers. Clue number 1, the mitochondria fuel problem that I identified as my own practitioner working on myself. My GI map, 2 keystone bacteria were extremely low. I never can say the words, Facilbacterium pronetzel and Akkermansia municipalilia. And these organisms make butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid. And we've learned about this. We've talked about butyrate before and short-chain fatty acids, but I want you to understand a little bit deeper on why butyrate actually matters. Butyrate is not just a gut nutrient. It is a mitochondria fuel. Think of butyrate as the kindling that helps mitochondria ignite ATP production. And without enough butyrate, our energy drops, ATP production. Endurance drops. Fat oxidation drops. Recovery slows down. Inflammation rises. And our gut lining weakens. And cortisol rises to compensate. So how is this showing up in my body? I have been noticing for years early fatigue in my runs. And running is harder on your body. Biking for me is easier. I've reduced power doing speed work and trying to do the sprint intervals. I just don't get anywhere. I just was like, what is wrong? I'm doing all the things I'm supposed to do and change and adjust in middle age. It's not the aging process. It's something going on at a cellular level. And we'll combine what I learned in my Mescreen test as we go here, which measured my mitochondria function. Now, might have some mild brain fog here and there, just like, wait, what is that? I forget things. And dry skin is a big indication of something going on, and less metabolic flexibility. When butyrate is low, I did not know this until I dug deeper into my correlations, mitochondria shift out of fat burning, and they shift instead into glucose dependence. That means on my longer runs, as I tried today, as we trained for a half marathon, trying to get 12-mile run in, it just never seems to get easier. I can go and go for long distance, but my speed doesn't improve. I get slower, and fat loss becomes more stubborn. So this is not a fitness issue. It's not the way I'm training. It's a fuel issue. Now, clue number 2 we went over a little bit is this high steatocrit. This is going deeper into fat malabsorption. It wasn't digestion, not digestive enzyme related to, say, lipase, enzyme that breaks fat down. But steatocrit tells you how much fat is passing through the stool instead of being absorbed. What a high steatocrit means, it's not a diet problem. It's not what I'm eating. It is a breakdown problem. And I had no idea about this until I did some investigation and put the missing pieces of my puzzle together that I'm reviewing with you today. Sluggish bile, low enzymes, poor micelle formation, fat-soluble vitamin deficiency, hormone precursor deficiency, and mitochondria membrane depletion can all relate to having a high steatocrit. So for me personally, even though I'm eating healthy fats every day, my body was not absorbing them very well. So this explains my correlation, dry skin, sudden increase in wrinkles, not just because I'm 54, but it's happening partially because of this fat malabsorption. Harder hormone balance. Again, not just blaming perimenopause. I'm not in menopause, I'm perimenopause. Reduction in endurance during my longer runs, which might just be 8 to 12 miles, not super long. I'm not training for a marathon, which isn't long for me. Back in the day, we were doing marathon training. We do 2.5 to 3 hour runs once a month. Now, impaired fat oxidation, stubborn fat, belly fat, despite training. Me, it's more in my thighs, and inconsistent energy. And here's the important distinction. My biking is manageable, as I said. Cycling, I can go 4 or 5 hours, have great endurance and great performance and strength on hills and recovery. But why is my running challenging? Why is it not ever improving, but my biking does? Running requires efficient fat oxidation because it is more weight bearing, obviously. It uses more stabilizing muscles. Running uses more oxygen. It's more oxygen sensitive. And running challenges the mitochondria differently. It is an interesting correlation. If fat absorption is impaired, why is running becoming harder than cycling? But this can be a direct metabolic clue for my health investigation. Clue number 3, elevated bilirubin on my blood chemistry panel test lately. That is a clue Remember, I'm looking at optimal ranges and I'm doing an FDN or advanced blood chemistry assessment analysis. Bilirubin was repeatedly high on my recent labs. Bilirubin on your blood chemistry marker is a bile flow marker and a window into how well is your phase 2, as well as phase 3, the drainage phase of our detoxification systems. I've done deep dive episodes on why bile even matters, because no one really seems to pay attention to how is your bile. It's not something we talk about. But as an FDN practitioner, I'm curious when I'm working on clients' nutritional therapy assessment, looking at their intake forms, signs, and symptoms, how is your bile flow? Because bile is required for fat digestion, hormone detoxification, estrogen clearance, microbial balance, mitochondria, membrane repair. And without good bile flow, we will see markers as steatocrit on your GI map increase, hormonal symptoms increase, lipopolysaccharides accumulate, fat loss slows down, detoxification is sluggish, it stalls. So how does this show up in my body? This was explaining why the GI map steatocrit was higher. Why do I struggle sometimes with dry skin, more on my scalp or behind my ears? Now I'm getting these weird skin spots. Fluctuating metabolism. My estrogen detox challenges is sometimes my blood work, my estrogen would be higher than it should be at my age, and depending on the day of my cycle. And mitochondria dysfunction, as we found out on my Mescreen mitochondria test earlier this year. We need to understand that bile is important and a missing link for many of us in our middle age, especially athletes. And this was one of my biggest bottlenecks I had no idea about until I did my testing and investigate and put these pieces together. We're looking for clues. We're investigating. I'm being that health detective and looking at all this information together. This wouldn't happen just looking at my blood work. And the blood work gives me clues to correlate against a GI map to see the whole picture. So we can't just do one test. Ideally, 3 different labs and genetics is really beneficial. A major clue, again, clue number 4. My H. pylori was still slightly elevated. This is after 8 weeks of being on Biomatrix Pylori X supplement trying to break down H. pylori. When we have H. pylori, or if you just have low stomach acid in general, and most people struggle with this, poor protein and mineral absorption is an issue. Any mild elevation will suppress stomach acid. I've done many episodes because it's so important to understand why stomach acid matters, especially for us fit and active middle-aged population. Because stomach acid is required to absorb iron. We need iron for oxygen delivery. Zinc. We need zinc for skin, your immune system, and your hormones. B12 is required for mitochondria and energy. Magnesium for recovery and ATP. And of course, amino acids, muscle repair. So if we struggle with low stomach acid from H. pylori being elevated, or you're taking antacids, over-the-counter Pepcid, something, or PPI medications that were never allowed to be prescribed over, I think, a month, 2 weeks max. It was a temporary fix or support, a Band-Aid. And now we've got people been on PPIs for years, impacting their ability to break down food properly and absorb and get these minerals from their stomach. For me personally, I am correlating this information with low iron. Even if you're taking iron supplements, are you still anemic? Zinc, B vitamins. You're taking B, but you're still not getting it from your food. Magnesium, amino acids. For me, I notice slower muscle gain. I'm doing all the right things. I'm taking my creatine, my essential aminos. I'm lifting heavy weights, but I'm not seeing a big difference. Soreness, maybe. Sometimes you can see declining performance, hormone imbalance, and sometimes some poor sleep quality. Again, not aging issues. It's not my training. It's looking at the root causes. Clue number 5. We found on my bacteria markers on my GI map, I shared elevated Enterobacter. This is an LPS endotoxin overload issue. Enterobacter is one of the highest LPS producing bacteria. And remember, LPS is lipopolysaccharides. This is a toxic compound released by certain bacteria as Enterobacter when the gut lining becomes compromised. So we have leaky gut. This LPS escapes and becomes the endotoxin. So why is LPS a metabolic disaster? Going into this a little deeper. LPS actually triggers inflammation, cortisol spikes, insulin resistance. A major one for me, low thyroid conversion, mitochondria dysfunction, poor fat oxidation, skin flare-ups, fatigue. This was on my list. So these toxins, endotoxins from lipopolysaccharides from having this bacteria to elevated, probably upstream we want to look at partially because of the low stomach acid, so guys get in. And then the vagus nerve. So we always want to look at not just this is high, but why is it high? How's it showing up so high in my body? But this is going to impact cortisol, my blood chemistry marker, the higher eosinophils, drier skin, metabolic slowdown, reduced running efficiency, glucose spikes, inability to burn fat during running. As soon as I saw this, I was in a mild version endotoxemia is what I'm seeing. I'm assuming this is obviously not life-threatening for me, but it's system altering. It's impacting my metabolism, and this is an issue for my performance. Now, clue number 6, the elevated eosinophils on my blood chemistry panel are telling us there's immune system is activated. Eosinophils have been elevated on multiple labs over the last few years, and this is not usually a sign of allergies. When eosinophils are higher, it's a sign of gut irritation, LPS overload, mucosal inflammation, and immune activation. This confirms that the gut was driving systemic inflammation, which aligns perfectly with my Enterobacter elevations on my GI map and low butyrate findings on the GI map. So that is a major clue. Clue number 7. When I took this test, it was a day before my cycle started. Cortisol was way higher than normal because of that luteal to follicular phase transition and the stress metabolism connection. When we have higher cortisol, it will shut off your fat burning, block thyroid conversion. So those that struggle getting T4 to convert to T3. High cortisol raises blood sugar. As I've said for years, every stress response is a blood sugar response. High cortisol will thin the gut lining. So when we talked for years about athletes, endurance training, how it can cause leaky gut. As high cortisol can happen when you're exercising too long, too hard, and especially in hot weather, will impact the gut lining and thin it and create more prone to leaky gut. High cortisol also increases inflammation, reduces your metabolic flexibility. So high cortisol should be high in the morning, lower in the evening, but higher when I took this test than normal. And this is blood work, not a Dutch test. I'd like to see a Dutch hormone panel to get more accuracy in this and taking it at the right days of my hormone cycle. But if your cortisol is higher than it should be on ideally Dutch hormone panel in your blood, you can see it will turn off your metabolism. When you see cortisol higher than it should be, it can be related to harder time losing weight for myself. My elevated fasting glucose, because it was the day before my cycle started, so we need to take note of when you're doing your lab work for females, your sleep quality, and for me, plateau and just not getting anywhere and running power. And that could be cortisol and glucose, and muscle loss without trying. Because we have high cortisol, we're catabolic, we're breaking down. And so that's why we want to look at the DHEA balance to cortisol. And cortisol gets worse when butyrate is low. Bile is sluggish and LPS is high. So this is a root cause for me, not a secondary symptom. So if cortisol will continue to be higher because the correlation of butyrate, bile, and LPS. Now, clue number 8, which I will talk to Mescreen about this, I found fascinating. On my Mescreen test, I went over a few times videos on my YouTube channel. Reactive oxygen species and the lipid profile part of the test, I scored really poorly on. That means I have more cell membrane stress and what's called network fragmentation. And this is a big clue and correlates right on with what I just discovered. The Mescreen mitochondria profile came back as the ROS lipid support result, which means I have more elevated oxidative stress, which is also called reactive oxygen species ROS. I have early membrane disruption, mitochondria network fragmentation, reduced energy flow, impaired beta oxidation, and lower ATP yield. So for you listeners to understand, ROS, reactive oxygen species, means these are natural byproducts of metabolism, but too much of it damages our mitochondria. What does lipid peroxidation mean? When oxidative stress damages cell membranes, including mitochondria membranes. So lipid is fat peroxidation, damage to the cell membranes because of the oxidative stress. And what does mitochondria network fragmentation mean? That means when mitochondria disconnect from each other, the energy becomes less efficient. So when they're more in a pack together, they're creating more efficient energy production. Now, for my correlation to know what I can measure to see if I'm feeling better, it's my own test I will be doing as I start to work on my personalized protocol, is my running performance. So this is an easy way for me to go, okay, am I getting better? Because running, as we went over, demands higher oxygen efficiency, strong mitochondrial coupling, smooth electron transport, strong beta oxidation, which means fat for fuel, and stable ATP delivery. My results from the Mescreen explain perfectly why cycling felt fine, easy for me, but running felt harder. I fatigue faster, and I struggle, I guess, why I don't lose weight, burning fat. I needed more carbs to maintain performance. And I never take anything on my long runs, which I think go up to 2 hours, but I probably should take something, even though I just hate carrying anything. So running requires more mitochondria stability than cycling. And my mitochondria are so-called leaky that they're producing excess reactive oxygen species, which forces me to glucose burning mode. And this is why my fat loss is stalled. Isn't it fascinating? So this is how I can help people put the missing pieces of the puzzle together. So for me, this is connecting to my fat loss issues. If my mitochondrial membranes are stressed, the electron transport becomes leaky and the reactive oxygen species or oxidative stress increases. When that happens, the fat cannot enter the mitochondria. And beta oxidation drops, so using fat in the Krebs cycle to create ATP is lowered and metabolism slows down. And weight loss becomes harder. And this is why you can't train your way out of this, and we must repair the cell membranes for me to get better. And even combining this with Pinoy metabolism testing, I'm not measuring myself for 40 minutes or more, which I could do, but I hate running on a treadmill. But if I could use a Pinoy analyzer when I'm going for an hour run, I would be ideal, which you can use. It is portable, but I would hate that. If I really want to know, I could test it out. It'd be a good experiment. So clue number 9, my genetics. My genetic risks align with my symptoms, which I think this is so powerful to look at, say, Wild Health Precision Medicine Clarity Report. I took my genetics I've done with Arivel years ago with the DNA company. And so when I look at the stress sensitivity genes that I have, I feel more stress more intensely. I hold adrenaline longer. Cortisol spikes more easily for me, and the gut-brain axis responds rapidly. And this amplifies the LPS cortisol effect. Now, when I look at my metabolic genetic SNPs, I'm more carb sensitive, insulin resistant under stress, impaired high fat tolerance, and bile dependent for digestion. So combine that with my high steatocrit, my sluggish biomarkers, high bilirubin. This created the perfect storm. So genetics, remember, do not determine destiny. They reveal vulnerabilities. And my vulnerabilities were activated by chronic stress, showing up obviously when I got my, metabolic chaos, March 2013, and gut dysbiosis, low butyrate. All this will impact our health, being fit and healthy from the inside out, as well as my low butyrate, mitochondrial reactive oxygen species we found on the Mescreen, and bile congestion. So we put all this together. Here's a full picture. I have been stuck probably for years in this low-grade cell danger response caused by low butyrate, fat malabsorption, sluggish bile, LPS endotoxemia, oxidative stress, mitochondria, membrane damage, and stress-sensitive genetics. This was created by low energy, poor fat oxidation, slower recovery, weight loss, resistance, dry skin. These are all the symptoms I have been experiencing. Metabolic inflexibility, performance plateau. And this is not age, it's not my hormones, not the training. Again, it's a system level dysfunction hidden under the hood. And this is why testing matters, because I have not done testing for the last 5 years. I was focusing on my business and helping other people first, not myself, and not focusing on that priority. So let's stop here and we'll continue on to part 3 on what's really going on. So thanks for listening, and we'll continue on to the next phase.
Thanks for listening to the Fit and Healthy Athlete Podcast. Coach Debbie Potts draws from decades of experience. Ready to optimize your health? Visit www.debbiepotts.net for a discovery call. Find her on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Coach Debbie Potts. To support the show, like, rate, and review. See you next time.